So we're about halfway through the test locations for Journey to the Table, and we've started to notice a couple of different trends. And so I'm sitting down with Kate today to figure out what we can do with our talk outlines. Because what we've seen so far is when students are sitting down, when participants are sitting down during the talk time, that's when the cell phones come out and people are doing this thing, and nobody's paying attention to the talk givers. But when students and participants are in conversation time, man, they're glued, and nobody's had to say, put your cell phones down, nobody's checking it, people just kind of police that on their own. So we're trying to figure out, and this has been an ongoing conversation, what we can do with the talk time to really use that and to say, let's reach out to people where they are in the way that they want to learn.
So, I mean, it's almost like wanting to have like facilitator, like seed planters instead of, I guess coming from the Emmaus and Chrysalis tradition, like we think about these talks as being times of like common information, common phrases, and testimonies being shared.
I feel like in Emmaus, it's information with a little bit of personal story.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So how do you? I mean, the talk outline is such an easy way to do that for what we do in Emmaus.
Sure.
But how then do you set up a talk giver? I mean, to really be more. It's almost more like a conversation leader, a conversation starter.
And the best one I've seen so far didn't feel like a presentation at all. I mean, and part of it was just setting. So the presenter is sitting on a stool and she's just talking. She's sharing what's going on in her life with all these people who are listening, and then they in turn share their stories with each other around their tables. And so how does the talk outline almost become not an outline of what you're going to say, but preparing you to say something about yourself so that everyone else can then share about themselves?
You have a quote. Someone says that.
Yeah, it's a Barbara Brown Taylor quote. And she had finished up giving a lecture and was into the question and answer time, and somebody stood up and asked a question. And she started to answer it as if, she had no problem answering. She was more than happy to share this bit of herself. And then she stops and she just kind of says, I'm more than happy to tell you my story, but I share my story only so that you will share your story with others. And then she went on to answer, and it was great.
I mean, that's really what we want.
Yeah, I think so.
So how do you prepare a talk giver? Essentially, I mean, what comes to mind is choose your own adventure books.
Yes, I read these when I was a kid, and they were all the cheesy Western stories,
Okay, well, some of them were not cheesy Western stories.
Oh, I only read a subgenre of them. But,
yeah. But yeah, I mean, you could take a different path while still, I mean, you covered. Gosh, I don't know how they created those books, because I felt like you ended up on the same pages, sometimes no matter how you got to them or from them. There were certain places that you crossed over.
I always used to switch to the back and try to figure out the different ending that I wanted, and try to how do I get to that ending?
Okay, so if we had an appropriate millennial childhood reminiscence. How do you do that? How do you do that with a teaching? How do you lay out an outline of sorts that guides that conversation starter person through enough common things? You want them to hit some of those core moments without necessarily dictating the beginning or the end, or maybe even the point.
So at the end of the talk outline, still have that kind of common thing. By the end of the talk, everyone will have heard about and thought about these sorts of things to prepare them for those conversations. But a guide of thinking about your own story.
Yeah.
And filling in those blanks for yourself, and then how to prepare the talk giver to share that, so that folks listening to it will get these things.
You know, that sounds fantastic, and not only fantastic for the ministry, but that sounds like such a transferable skill out into actual living out your own faith in the real world with peers, with friends, in church, out of church.
Can we call it Choose Your Own Outline Talks, or is that trademarked somewhere? I don't know.
Well, Choose Your Own Outline would be different than Choose Your Own Adventure.
Choose Your Own Adventure.
I think we're onto something.
I think so.